Hi, I'm Lindsay Johnson, and I'm part of the team at Worldwide Clinical Trials, a global full-service CRO, where rare and orphan disease is one of our core focus areas. Rare disease may be rare, but not scarce, given its effects about 10% of the global population. Clinical research for rare disease is untraditional and has a number of unique challenges, indication-specific and otherwise. Whether lack of precedence, population heterogeny, or lengthy diagnosis journey, to name a few, there still remains over 90% of rare diseases without approved treatments. Today, with advancing science and innovative methods and design, there are more opportunities to bring effective treatments to rare disease patients who remain anxiously waiting. Rare disease research starts with the patient. It's crucial that sponsors enlist a team that is committed to an approach that personally engages and understands patients, their families, and their community forums, while also aligning to study objectives. Rare disease research is personal. It requires extra devotion to overcome the hurdles and a nuanced balance of an intimate team that will take the meticulous, personalized approach it requires and the global presence to connect with the patients. Incorporating all of these together, it comes down to a successful partnership in order to work together and make an impact on people's lives, answering a severely unmet medical need in the rare disease world. Today, I'll be speaking with rare disease experts who are passionate about patients and dedicated to rare disease research. I'll be gathering their perspectives on their partnership and how to develop creative strategies for planning and operationalizing rare disease programs while easing patient burden and optimizing their clinical trial experience. We'll be specifically focusing on how to engage and collaborate with patients. Now let's meet our experts. First, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Sharon Rinko from Cyclo Therapeutics. Dr. Rinko, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here with you and Dr. Murphy to talk about this pressing issue. I'm Sharon Rinko. I am the Chief Scientific Officer and the Senior Vice President for Medical Affairs at Cyclo Therapeutics. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and that lab experience that I've had has come in very handy as we have explored neurodegenerative diseases, and we'll talk a little bit about Niemann-Pick type C in particular. Before I joined Cyclo Therapeutics, I spent 20 years in federal service, primarily at the National Institutes of Health, where I played a leadership role in providing grants on global health and training next generation scientists. After my 20 years of federal service, I moved to lead a nonprofit on pandemic disease, and it was there that I met Scott Fine, the CEO of our company, which is listed on the NASDAQ and publicly traded, by the way. I met Scott and decided to join him to help build out this platform technology using cyclodextrins for Niemann-Pick disease type C. So that's a bit about myself. But before I stop, I do want to say a word about global health and rare diseases. And I think it's important to note at the outset. Rare diseases, and particularly ultra-rare diseases, such as the one in which we work, Niemann-Pick type C, can only be solved through international cooperation. And the reason for that is that there are so few patients in any one country that we really can't develop and execute solid clinical trials unless we work as partners internationally. I know Worldwide shares that vision with us, and that's just one of the many reasons that we're happy to be working with Worldwide on our programs.
Thank you, Dr. Rinko. I appreciate you joining us today. Next, we have Dr. Michael Murphy, one of the founders from Worldwide Clinical Trials.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Sharon. I'm Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for the company. As Lindsay has indicated, one of the founders of the company. Our company was created by physicians with a strong belief that medicine and science married to really good trial operations would provide a differentiated service for this field. Any given day, I'm involved with innumerable projects and programs, particularly in the orphan disease space because of the terrific unmet clinical need that exists in these indications. The very interesting technology that is developed, such as that represented by Cyclo, the very innovative trial designs and increasingly evolving regulatory sentiments about how to get these products approved. So the passion here is about the patient, the technology, and about the wonderful relationship we can have with the sponsor to bring something into fruition. So thank you for having me here today.
Great, thank you both. Now, Dr. Rinko, can you please share with us some information about the important research Cyclo is currently working on?
I'll say a word about Niemann-Pick disease first. I'll say a word about our product, our Trapsol Cyclo, cyclodextrin product. And I'll say a word about our compassionate use programs, which all brings us to where we are today. I should start with the disease itself. Niemann-Pick type C is a rare genetic disease which causes progressive disability and often premature death. It affects the brain as well as liver, lungs, spleen. It's called a neurovisceral disease. So patients who receive this diagnosis have a struggle ahead of them. Their families struggle to keep up with the progressive disability that the patients experience over their lifetime. Things like wheelchairs, ultimately potentially feeding tubes, behavioral medications, symptomatic treatments come into play. Now, there's no approved treatment for Niemann-Pick type C in the United States. There is one approved in Europe. It's focused on a limited number of neurologic manifestations of the disease, and it has some side effects which some patients find intolerable. So there really is an unmet medical need here for Niemann-Pick type C. The defect in Niemann-Pick C is a protein, the NPC1 protein, or in some cases NPC2, but 95% of the patients are NPC1. And that protein is involved in shuttling cholesterol normally through cells. And when there's a defect in that protein, cholesterol gets stuck in a compartment of the cell called the lysosome. And that leads to dysfunction of cells and ultimately to the manifestations of the disease. So our drug, Trapsol Cyclo, which is a cyclodextrin product, it binds cholesterol, and it essentially lifts cholesterol from cells and allows the cells to function normally. So because of that, patients can alleviate symptomology of the disease. And if we treat our patients in our formal programs, which we'll talk about, I know in just a few moments, every 2 weeks. So this is very much a maintenance drug. So that's a word about the disease and about our drug. So how did we get here? And we got here basically because a young postdoc named Benny Liu discovered that cyclodextrins, our drug, could clear cholesterol from cells in the mouse model of Niemann-Pick disease. Later on, it was also shown in the cat model. Basically, on infusion of the drug, the mice, the NPC mice, had prolonged life, had delay of onset of symptoms, and the drug cleared the cholesterol out of the liver and out of the body and normalized cholesterol homeostasis, essentially. So there's rock solid animal data, which was one of the main reasons that we decided to pursue this drug development program for NPC. But secondarily, and related to what I just said about Dr. Benny Liu, is that physicians started to use our drug on a compassionate basis once word got out about Dr. Liu's discoveries. And that started in 2009 with the first physician in the United States, named Caroline Hastings, who started to provide the drug with FDA approval on a compassionate use basis. And then the protocol was picked up by physicians in Brazil and other places, and ultimately started to be used. So when we got involved with the company, we had 6 years of data at that time, people using our drug compassionately. And what we learned, and what I did when I first joined the company, was visit some of the families and physicians who use the drug and listen to their stories. And this gets to your point about patient focus. We learned, for example, that patients were able to have better handwriting, be able to walk better, be able to speak more clearly. One family told me that they were able to have dinner with their 2 affected children after starting on the drug, when previously there had been behavioral outbursts at the table that were minimized. So real quality of life. Now these are anecdotal. We did publish a paper on this, and Dr. Murphy, I know, will want to speak about how we turn anecdotal data into formal trial data. But that's some of the rationale for why we got into our drug development program.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rinko. It goes without saying how valuable Cyclo's work is and your commitment to patients. My next question can be split into two parts. What were some of your biggest challenges in developing this program? And what were some aspects you identified up front that you knew would need additional thinking and support? And the second part of that question, why was including a CRO so important? What insights did Worldwide bring to your rare disease program planning?
Our company has a significant amount of experience working with the Niemann-Pick disease indication, as I mentioned, because of our compassionate use programs. We also have a phase 1 and a phase 2 trial for the same indication with our same drug, Trapsol Cyclo. The US trial has finished, and the phase 2 trial will finish at the beginning of 2021. And so we have a significant amount of experience, but now we're moving into our phase 3 pivotal program. And that for us represents a different scenario altogether. We know that the regulators look with great scrutiny at the phase 3 clinical trial data as we work toward market authorization. And because of that, we wanted to have a partner who could help us really from the very beginning of the trial to all the way to the very end and bring us to market authorization. Now, we had worked previously with a number of small and really excellent CROs to bring us to completion in our phase 1 program and now soon to our phase 2 program, but we needed to really step up our game. And so we looked for a CRO that could help us to do, as I just said, bring us to market authorization. So what do we look for in a CRO? First, we wanted to have a CRO with expertise in rare diseases. You know, there are 7,000 rare diseases and in the United States, or categorized by the United States. No single CRO could possibly have expertise in every single one of these 7,000. So we looked for a CRO with great expertise in rare diseases generally, and then we looked for a CRO with very broad scientific expertise overall so that we could build our program based on solid science and with a group that could meet the rare disease expertise. Of course, we also very much, since we're very patient-oriented, wanted a CRO that would invest the time with us in speaking to patients, hearing from patients, to really understand the totality of the disease as we were designing. All of these criteria were met with Worldwide. So that's number one, very important for us. But I will also say that as we go forward, you asked about challenges. As we go forward, we very much want to build on the very solid foundation that has already been put in place with our phase 1 and phase 2 partners. And we have come up with a matrix way of doing this. It's a model that Worldwide has not only endorsed, but embraced. And so we're continuing to work with those partners that have been with us side by side for these past 5 years, shoulder to shoulder as we've built our programs, and continuing on with them as part of this matrix model. As example, Professor Alan Boyd, who's one of the top pharmaceutical physicians in the UK and has been our chief medic on our early programs, will continue on with our data monitoring committee, as will our medical monitor, who will continue on with our compassionate programs, thereby bringing their expertise and their knowledge sets into our phase 3 program. So that's a word on how we're approaching, and we're just delighted with the openness and accessibility of our colleagues at Worldwide to bring us to success.
It's been a privilege to work with Cyclo. So we came on board. I think the differentiation was Cyclo permitted us to take a strategic role in the program, not just transactionally, can we run the study, but what does it mean to the patients, the investigators, the company? How do we strategically become invested in this terrific project? So The exact remit was protocol, regulatory strategy, and operational solutions, of course, kind of a make it happen. Can you make it happen in a way that has great signal detection, great data integrity? But what Cyclo additionally did, which we were very appreciative of, is gave us access to some of those wonderful consultants that Sharon just mentioned, who gave us some insights on what it's like to manage a patient with this horrible disease, as well as with the patients themselves. So naturally, every CRO doesn't understand the nuances of the disease. Sharon's team gave us terrific insights on pharmacology. Sharon's experts gave us some insights on assessments and patient management. And the patients gave us insight into what's important to them. What is the illness like as much as what is the disease is like? And in the process, what it's done is very interesting dynamic. It's made us personally invested in this. Yes, professionally, we're very invested. But I always say that these studies ride on passion. You have to be able to deal with issues that come up. They always seem to come up. And you have to have people that understand how to solve those issues, and importantly, why they need to solve the issues to bring this program to a successful conclusion. So I can speak for behalf of a much larger group in the company to say what a terrifically productive the relationship this has been. And it's because, again, of the strategic involvement, the strategic enmeshment in every aspect of the program.
Rare disease research requires those deepened partnerships across all stakeholders, most significantly through collaboration with patients specifically. Can you tell us at what point, Sharon, you involved patients and what was your approach and what did you learn?
We have a commitment to patients really right from the beginning. When I mentioned our compassionate use programs, really one of the driving forces for our company was when we started to meet and talk with patients and families and hear from their experience. But in a formal clinical trial, of course, it's a different scenario because we do not have direct contact with patients. However, we can work with nonprofit advocacy organizations for patients. And there are several that we work with. There are two that we, every year for the last 5 years, we attend the annual meetings of these NPC advocacy groups. So they bring together NPC families, NPC physicians, scientists, clinicians, and industry partners, importantly. One is in the UK, it's called NP UK. The other one in the United States called the National Niemann-Pick Disease Foundation. So we try to work with them as much as we can and collaborate with them. Now, this past year, we were very happy when NNPDF, the US organization, hosted a side meeting for us with some patients and families. Again, we take the opportunity, we just want to hear from patients about their diagnostic journey, what it's like to live with NPC. This helps us as we design our programs that are intended to meet their needs. And this year we were very happy that Worldwide joined us in that activity. And I think that some of the insights that were gleaned from our conversation were very impactful and helped us as we finalized our pivotal trial design.
There were a couple of really seminal moments in this relationship. One was interacting with some of the key opinion leaders, such as Carolyn Hastings. So this is how it works. So a CRO that is responsible will invest themselves in knowing everything they can about the disease pathophysiology, about the therapeutic intervention, about the this and that of the disease so we can design the study appropriately. But a protocol is nothing more than a template for data acquisition in clinical care. So we have to understand what the clinical care actually looks like. What is it like to manage these patients? What are the issues you encounter? So a key opinion leader like Dr. Hastings was invaluable in that regard. The measures, the issues at work, the things that are problematic, it helps us shape the subtlety and the detail that goes into these studies design. But the real epiphany, and I speak for myself as well as others, occurred when we did have a chance to meet with the families. I remember it vividly, Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m., 3-hour call. I could have gone on longer with it. When we had a chance to listen to the patients and and see them as well, and have a wonderful sense of what the illness was like, not what the disease is, but what's the experience of having this illness. And it was really apparent that every patient presents with a different montage of signs and symptoms. Every patient has a different weighting in terms of what's important to them and their family. Every patient is going to arrive in our protocol through a very different pathway. And appreciating that helps the team design the study appropriately, operationalize the study responsibly, approach the analyses in a way which extracts out a group effect from what we already believe we know anecdotally from open label data. That's the challenge, you see, pulling out a group effect when we know that there's a pharmacology in there that looks very exciting for these particular patients. So just to highlight what Sharon has said, it's the matrix team is the way to do this. Everyone brings something different to the table, and the families bring something remarkably different to the table. So at Worldwide, knowing the families and working with the families really transcends the traditional CRO orientation. Can I find patients? We're well beyond that. Is what can you do to contribute to the design of this study and how we implement the study, and what assessments are really key to you. They are partners in this process. They are with us right from the beginning of the process, and we very much attend to the sentiments that they expressed. In fact, just to close this anecdote on the family meeting, after our 3-hour meeting, I called my colleague. I said, we had no idea. We thought we understood. We really didn't understand this. I said, this meeting has opened up a whole universe of issues that we had never really attended to. So just to put some emphasis on what Sharon is speaking to here today.
Couldn't agree more. And from those sessions, the information helped your development of a personalized patient-reported outcome. Can you tell me more about that?
All orphan diseases, and Niemann-Pick's is not different, characterized by significant between-patient differences. Patients standing side by side who look like they have a very different type of disease. So one of the challenges that the industry is facing and the society is facing is how do we capture that heterogeneity? Remember, every patient's slightly different, means the assessments might be weighted slightly different. There has to be a common metrics, otherwise we can't judge therapeutic effect. But more importantly, in some respects, we need to know at an individual patient level what might be relevant to them. And I highlighted the anecdote a couple of years ago. We were all having congresses that we would attend. We weren't restricted. Someone asked a gentleman who was the president of an advocacy group what would be an important drug effect in his daughter's condition. It was a neuromuscular disorder, not that much different from NPC. Well, he says, he says, if my little girl could stand up and walk 15 feet to the potty, I would think that was really important. So no measure you could come up with would capture that sufficiently adequate. So we engaged in a whole new initiative, which we vetted with the FDA. They were quite interested in this, to capture outcomes which are uniquely specific to each patient and then illustrate a drug effect by examining that in the overall program. Now, it's not our primary endpoint. That would not be at this juncture of development appropriate, but it is an important endpoint. It's an endpoint that puts some context around measures which frankly in the orphan disease space are sometimes very difficult to interpret because they're somewhat arcane. The way the measures occurred, how they're done, it's a little bit difficult. But a patient-specific outcome, something that speaks to how a patient feels and functions in a way that's meaningful, that has a lot of traction. So that was a very major initiative in this particular program. We're really excited about it.
Here, I'll just amplify a little bit on that, and I agree. It's always compelling to meet with families and hear patients. We had also had an opportunity to talk with patients and to understand and to participate in an FDA externally led meeting on what is important to patients themselves in the disease. So as Dr. Murphy said, we really want to understand what will make a difference in their quality of life. We learned as a community that the 5 features of NPC that matter most, if we were to improve any single one of them, patients would be happy about it, are the ability to speak, the ability to swallow, fine motor skills, at walking, and cognition. And so the community has come up with those 5, which now form the basis of our primary outcome measure in our pivotal. But as far as patient-reported outcomes go, that's different. So we have this standard scale where we can measure those disease features, but what's important to patients? What's meaningful to patients? So if we look at, and this is where the patient-reported outcome tool is so important and where Worldwide has been so very helpful to us. What we want to understand is, will small differences in any one of those, if we can measure it, really matter to the patient and later on to the payers and to the health authorities that we will ultimately work with. So these patient-reported outcomes are now an integral part of our pivotal design. So we're looking for meaningful change to patients. And the only other point that I'll make as a result of our family meeting that Dr. Murphy mentioned was we also learned that no change is meaningful to this patient population. So for example, in this disease, over the space of 1 year, patients would be expected to progress in their disease. We learned that if patients didn't progress, if there's no change, that's actually meaningful to them. If they can keep the status quo, that's success for many patients. So we've taken note of that, and we've incorporated that sentiment or that measurement into our current trial. Again, listening to the families.
So if we're walking through your planning process, your next steps involved interactions with the FDA. How was that, and what did they think about your close involvement with patients when developing the program?
I think it's expected nowadays, must have involvement. On occasion, we have had the advocacy group members actually with us at the meetings, part of the meetings. Families are perceived as part of the team from the initial concept of the product. We are strategically invested in that. So as Sharon has said, these programs work best when you put together a matrix. That means lots of different people bringing different ideas to the table, and that includes family. It's been my privilege here for a number of years to lead the fellowship program, and all of our fellows were involved with this. And I said to them, you know what is it we really do? We adjudicate multiple conflicting interests when we try to design these studies. We try to find a balancing spot where everyone is reasonably content with the result of the effort, and that's the art of designing trials in orphan diseases, family particularly. Now, because there are many stakeholders, there are stakeholders beyond the FDA. FDA just says, is it on the market, right? But they're not the only stakeholders. We have key opinion leaders. We have practicing physicians. They have to feel comfortable with the agent. They have to adopt the agent in their clinical care practice. They have to believe that it has some meritorious effect with no significant liability for safety, appropriately based on data. But we also have other stakeholders, people that control access. FDA controls approval, physicians control adoption, but payers control access, and that is a big topic. So in any orphan disease meeting you would tend to go to, at least a third of the conversation, how do we guarantee access? So in the back of our minds, sometimes very much in the front of our minds, we're thinking about what type of data in this study would actually resonate with someone who is responsible for placing this product on formulary and reimbursing it in a responsible way so that a family could actually afford to have access to it. So Niemann-Pick offers many such opportunities. It's a fascinatingly interesting subject. Sometimes the measures, I've done many years, sometimes the measures that we think are most clinically relevant are sometimes not weighted as heavily by individuals who are responsible for these key, basically value-based propositions. So what we're trying to do in this program is not only demonstrate the effect of the drug, which is the biological properties of the agent, the efficacy of the drug, which is the effect of the drug in an idealized setting with great investigators and really great patients, but also the effectiveness and efficiency of the drug. What's the value of the drug in this particular disease? I really think we're well positioned to hit the bar on all of those. So that's the strategic imperative here. If you build it, will someone come? So you have to have that as the back of your mind. And I'm very excited about that particular aspect. I spent so many years doing this, that I see the boxes being checked all along the way for this program.
I'll amplify only in one sentence, and that first I have to say how confident we are working with you and the team on the regulatory strategy. And we do have in-house expertise with our own Mike Liszczak, but we are delighted to be working with you on the regulatory strategy side. I will note as well, we've talked about FDA, but we're having similar conversations with EMA as well. And that will be very important as we go forward, because we do have a global study. So we need to think very globally, and of course, worldwide, nobody better for us in that regard.
It's one thing to have an interesting scientific and medical concept. It's another thing to make it happen in a number of different countries where there are different regulatory sentiments, different standards of care, different patient-related issues. So the art of an internationally focused CRO is to assure that those elements are aligned before you start the study, so that it executes in a predictable fashion and in a sensitive fashion, right? And then, of course, when there are the inevitable challenges that occur, to be able to remediate those issues in real time. One thing about our organization, which I'm very proud of, being one of the founders of it, is that the senior management of the company, and that's people beyond myself for sure, are not only interested in managing issues as they come up, they're actually capable of managing the issues as well. Many people have expressed the sentiment, we're here for you, but that's quite different than saying we're here for you and we can do something about it. And I think the senior management of Worldwide really exemplifies that particular attitude, kind of on hands problem solving, no matter what the domain is, financial, scientific, medical, whatever it is. And so I think that really speaks very favorably for the program. I think most CROs don't really differ that much in the basic services, process infrastructure, SOP, staffing models, you name it. But where they differ is commitment, follow through, and persistency. And that's the element that really is important here. And so what we've developed with Cyclo is that sense of we owe the company, we owe the patients. This transcends any business relationship. And that's the most important thing, in my opinion, that's come out of the relationship today.
Dr. Rinko, keeping on that topic, were there any other innovative clinical trial methodology solutions and operations strategies that you included in your program?
I would like to answer that question by picking up on what Dr. Murphy just noted. And I do want to say and add that our experience thus far with Worldwide has been excellent, not only because of the science, and of course I'm going to talk about the science in just a moment, but because of every function that's involved in this study, from the BD side, from the get-go, straight through the design, and now working into execution. And we will have first patient in right around the corner. So every part of the Worldwide experience for us has been a positive, and I do want to be sure that we get that out there. But next, I think we have to focus on the science, because we're an evidence-based, evidence-driven organization ourselves, science-based, and we share that value system with Worldwide. And I want to spend just a moment on the science and the depth of expertise and the breadth of expertise, which benefits us. I'm going to start by noting something that Dr. Murphy rarely notes, probably publicly, about his own background, and that is that he is one of the developers of an instrument called the ADAS-Cog, which is a staple in Alzheimer's disease. Very important in being able to quantify behavioral and cognitive ability in that patient population. So right here, we have one of the leading experts in Alzheimer's. My point is that because Dr. Murphy loves to talk about Alzheimer's, loves to talk about neurodegenerative diseases, we are benefiting. He's out there in the community circulating with all the leading experts. And as we design our program, he's bringing all of that to the table to help us. So it's the depth of expertise, the breadth of expertise, the cross-fertilization across neurodegenerative areas, very important to us. We've been able to capitalize on that asset, if you will. The other thing that I do want to note, and this is a place where many companies will fail and other companies have faltered and failed even in the NPC space right at the finish line, is because of statistics. And once again, this is an area that we do want to applaud worldwide for their capacity in terms of the statistics. We have a rock solid plan in our design on statistics, and we've internalized many of the kernels of wisdom that Dr. Murphy and others at Worldwide have shared with us in terms of the import of spending so much time here at the beginning on the statistical analysis plan, making sure that it's right, because at the end of the day, the data and the statistics matter to getting our drug approved. And so I just want to sort of give a shout out there for the Worldwide team in that regard.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Of course, it's quite a team. Our company has been organized since its inception around cognitive disorders. And there's truly some gifted individuals in our company in terms of those assessments. And what it's done over the years, I can tell you, has made us very humble because we're continuing to learn a lot about how to design measures, implement these measures, analyze the measures. It's the fabric of what we do. The biostatistical component is, of course, that it's key to all these programs. I half jokingly say one of the topics I was never interested in medical school was biostatistics. My whole world, it seems, wraps around methods of analysis. So why is that? Because all clinical research is based only on 4 pillars: design, execution, analysis, and if you did it right, the interpretation. Each of those has to be one, and they have to be one sequentially. You cannot rescue a bad design or flawed execution with brilliant biostatistical machinations. And I have to say, half jokingly, in my career, I've had a few examples of trying to do that. So you have to line things up right at the beginning so that it's a seamless integration, and bring in a lot of experts, both within the company and external to the company, to make sure that that is properly aligned. So this notion of thinking through the whole program from beginning to end is built into the fabric of our particular organization. And so many things will affect this. So something just to show you how this adjudication process works. Duration. How long is the study? Well, listen to the clinical colleagues and the biostats experts. Well, longer is better, Mike, in principle. We have more opportunity, for the product to mature, more opportunity to see a difference perhaps between treatment groups. Then all of a sudden the operations people, whoa, just a second now. You have a long-term study, people might not be capable or interested in sticking with you for the duration of that trial. How do we guarantee patient adherence for the remainder of that So it ripples into every aspect that we do. There is no design element that does not affect operations. They're the same part of the same story. And both of those groups materially impact how the study is analyzed. And if we did all that correctly, there should be a seamless interpretation at the end. So that's kind of the spirit of how we move forward here. Every design element is weighed and considered from a number of different points of view. And I like to illustrate the fact by saying you put two of us in the room, there will be 3 or 4 different opinions about what that needs to look like, which is the way it should be. We're engaged in discovery efforts here, which don't have much precedent. If we're developing a very traditional indication where there have been 50 other studies and products, well, that's a lot of prior art. You can borrow from that, use that, but this is not the case here. We only have a few studies, we only have a few examples of how this was done. They were very informative, by the way, compliments to those that were trailblazers before us. But fundamentally, you're trying to learn how to do it while you're doing it, and you try to anticipate what the result would be in a successful outcome. So quite a challenge, and that's why we have the whole team. I think in terms of all the programs we have, if I may speak frankly, I don't think we have any that have touched more functional groups and more repetitively over this last year, Sharon. Every functional group has been involved in really key ways. I mean, not just incidental. So it's a remarkable story in and of itself, but I think it's a model of how to do these things. I really do. I think this is how you want to do it.
I'd add the hypervariability. That's a word that we use a lot because it's a hypervariable disease. So even siblings can present differently. So it's hypervariable. So we don't know, what to expect from any individual patients.
Yes, the art of doing clinical research, Sharon, in some respects, is the art of extracting signal from an ocean of noise. That's what it is. And so all of our efforts are around tampering down the noise, so to speak, and accentuating the signal and doing it in a way that's clinically informative and interpretable.
Well, I know how meaningful and successful this partnership has been thus far, and I'm really excited about what's to come for both of you and both companies. Do either of you have any last thoughts or advice on how other sponsors can cultivate a great partnership like this and benefit from it?
Well, I'll start because I think communication is key. And mutual respect. And I think that our collaboration, has both of those in spades. The communication particularly good. And I will say that, as well as the mutual respect, I shouldn't say one better than the other. But communication is interesting. And Dr. Murphy was just talking about adjudicating multiple, sometimes competing interests. That there's, from our side, so we're a company, we have many stakeholders, we have timelines, we have milestones. And our conversation, in addition to caring about the patients and making sure that we meet their needs and be sure that the data are pristine, we have other factors that we bring into the conversation. So sometimes we don't always agree, but that's where the communication comes in, and that's where the adjudication comes in, and we always find creative ways forward. That's one thing I can say. We've hit some snags, but we have always found creative ways forward that gets everybody to where they need to be.
Yes, it's so true. As the expression goes, all of us together are better than any one of us alone. And the other spirit there is definitely the notion of accessibility. As I tell our team, we will not be framed, we will not be calibrated. When we take hands on a project, we are with you as needed to bring that to a successful conclusion, or as we like to say, with you to the last successful p-value. We will be with you to the end of the trial. But well said, Sharon. That's how you learn. That's how you pick up new insights and ways of doing things. And the spirit has to be one of humility and accessibility, and mostly the art of listening. I always say it's taken many of us our whole lives to learn how to properly listen. So to listen, to consider, to weigh, and to come up with maybe a solution that everyone thinks is pretty good.
There's one other thought to share, and that is along the same line. One thing that the team hears me say often is how can we as a sponsor help you as you help us? We have a certain set of knowledge that we can share on the community and so on, and prior use of our drug and so on. we want to bring it to you because you are ultimately going to be designing and helping us get to where we need to be. And I think that sentiment works both ways.
Very informative. Just an anecdote. I was asking Sharon, so how could it be that people have, changes in speech so quickly after having an infusion? Well, Sharon had a beautiful, physiologically sound explanation why that could be true. Another anecdote, Sharon, that I really enjoyed speaking to you about was persistency of effect. If I was exposed to product before, does it change? Fascinatingly important subject in all of clinical research, but Sharon was able to present a incredibly scientifically plausible reason why that was a factor. And all of a sudden I go, well, that means we have a design issue we need to deal with, which in turn has an operational consequence. So just a fine example how we learn from each other. Everyone brings something different, every different point of view and a different set of knowledge. Sometimes I liken it to a marathon where you're part of the team, you're running a race, you're passing the batons. In this case, we go around in a circle a lot too. But this notion of constantly speaking to the issue, being accessible, being humble about some previous notion you may have had that is now completely vacuous, that's a part of the process of successful relationship.
Very helpful insights. Thank you both. For my last question, if someone would like to find out more about the important work that you both do, where can they go?
Well, I think our website is great. I would direct folks to www.cyclotherapeutics.com.
I love talking about this, as you can tell, whether it's an investigator, a company, someone that's interested in what we're doing. I'm accessible. I can speak with a great deal of interest in this and a great deal of commitment. You can also go to our website to learn more about our company, about our corporate philosophy, about how we're organized, and importantly, how we're committed to advancing the cause of good medicine, particularly in rare and devastating disorders such as Niemann-Pick.
Well, in closing, I want to thank you both for joining me today and sharing your insights. Worldwide thanks you, Dr. Rinko and Cyclo, for your commitment to bringing effective treatments to patients in waiting and having us as your partner to support your research efforts. And my additional thanks to everyone who is listening today. Thank you.